This week's Torah portion is Parashat Eikev. There's literally so much to talk about, and we're going to dive into the concepts that Zera Shimshon shares with us. We're going to have three amazing concepts we're going to share this week. And before we start, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Before that, I'd like to welcome back Arlene, who's been away for a little while. We've been praying for her, and everyone's clapping their hands. Thank God that you're well, you're healthy, and you're back with us, and it means a lot to us that you are here. We all had you in mind. So thank God, Baruch Hashem, that you're back with us. For tonight's sponsors, in no specific order, just in the way they came in, starting off with Bracha Steinfeld, in honor of her children and her grandchildren. Thank you very much, that they should be healthy, successful, happy, and great servants of Hashem. Amen. Next, Ron Friedman, as a special honor for his wife Eileen's birthday, which was yesterday. We're not going to say how old she is because she doesn't even look half of what she is. So we're not to say, who cares, right? Who cares? No one's counting. So a big mazel tov, Ron, in honor of Eileen's birthday, wishing her health, happiness, success, longevity, and nachas from her children and her grandchildren. Amen. Also, from Ron and Eileen, in honor of my wife's birthday, which was 3 days ago, and in honor of Jordana's birthday, which is tomorrow. Jordana, their granddaughter. So may they all live, be happy and well. August is a big birthday month for the Friedman and for the Laredo families. Maybe many of you as well. We'll speak about that another time. So big mazel tov to all the birthdays in August. Next, to Yasmin Rezi Bat Sonia Friedman, another Friedman, not related, in honor of her own birthday, which is tomorrow. Look at that. And also in honor of her two best friends' birthdays, Chana Rivka Bat Chaya Edel, as well as Chaya Sarah Bat Devora, that they should all be strong warrior mothers. May Hashem bless them and their families this upcoming year with Gesund, means good health, Parnasa, Bracha, blessing, Hatzlacha, success, Refuah, health again, and Menuchat HaNefesh. Yeah, all of us parents need some Menuchat HaNefesh, some tranquility with everything that's going on. Last but not least, Miriam Chedva, for the refuah shlema of her husband, who was in the OR, in the operating room all day today, and thank God just a couple hours ago was released for recovery, please God. So his name is Kambiz Yitzchak Ben Moluk, and may he have a speedy recovery in honor of the Torah that we are all learning tonight, the holy words of the Zera Shimshon. Amen v'amen. Thank you to all our sponsors, greatly appreciated. Any of you that are watching on YouTube, please click the link below to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That helps us grow our channel and spread the Torah even more. So thank you, everyone. With no further ado, we are jumping into this week's parasha. And as we mentioned, it is Parashat Eikev. Eikev, loosely translated to those of us who do speak the Hebrew language, is a heel. And the basic theme in the beginning of this week's Torah portion is not to step on or not to disregard any mitzvah, even those which we would think may not have the greatest of value or the greatest of reward or the greatest enthusiasm that we have in performing them. We should not step on them with our heel as if they're not so important, or we shouldn't be so enthusiastic about it. On the contrary, we need to take all of the mitzvot that Hashem gave us quite seriously. The Zera Shimshon takes a look at our first verse in this week's Torah portion, and I'm going to share it with you. Let's take a look. Here we go. Does everyone see on your screen? We're in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 12. It says as follows, V'haya Eikev tishme'un. There's that word Eikev, right? Which here it says you will heed to the ordinances, but literally translated is, as we said, Eikev is a heel. Et hamishpatim ha'ele ushmartem v'asitem otam. And it will be because you will heed these ordinances and keep them and perform them. V'shamar Adonai Elohecha lecha taberit v'tachesed asher nishba lavotecha. And God, your Lord, your God, will keep you for the covenant and the kindness that he swore to you, to your forefathers. So What the Zera Shimshon is pointing out to over here, which is basic understanding in our very first Torah portion, is that it seems, there is a reward in this world for our good deeds, for learning what we need to do and observing what we need to do, all based on the word of God. How do we see that in our verse? We see it that God says that he will guard, he will keep the covenant that he made with our forefathers, which was plenty of reward, merit, and blessing. That's what it seems like in our first verse of this week's Torah portion. The Zera Shimshon addresses, and he says, do you know that this theme of reward for fulfilling mitzvot does not just pop up right over here, it actually starts the previous verse. That would be in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 11. Take a look at your screen. We have the last verse in the end of last week's Torah portion of Vayetchanan. It says, "V'shamarta et hamitzvah ve'et hachokim ve'et hamishpatim," and you shall therefore observe the commandments, the statutes, and the ordinances, asher anochi mitzavecha hayom la'asotam, which I command you this day to do. So we have both verses side by side. We have the beginning of this week's Torah portion and its previous verse right under it, the last verse in last week's Torah portion. They both are stemming off the same concept, that we're obligated to, by God, to observe his Torah, observe his commandments. There is a couple differences. The first is that Zera Shimshon pays attention is in the first verse, really, in the last week's verse, it doesn't say anything about reward. In this week, it does. It says that God is going to guard the covenant that he made with our forefathers. To this, Rashi makes a very, very important statement. You see this word over here that I highlighted, hayom? I think I did it. Okay, here. This word, hayom. Hayom means today. This day that God commands us to observe the mitzvot. Rashi says, hayom la'asotam, today to fulfill them, umachar litol secharam, but tomorrow to reap the rewards and the benefits. In other words, what Rashi is telling us is, today in this world, we're obligated to fulfill the mitzvot. Tomorrow, which is in the next world, that's where we will reap the benefits and the rewards. The problem with that is the very following verse says we are to observe the ordinances, perform them, and God will reward us. So Zera Shimshon looks at these verses and he says, in the first verse, meaning the last week's verse, it says, no reward in this world. This week's verse, it says, yes, reward in this world. Fair question? I think it's an obvious question. It's a question which pertains to all of us. The good that I do in this world, the good that I do right now is by studying Torah, by giving charity, by making a blessing before I eat something. Am I having a benefit from that right now, or is it only later, meaning in the world to come? Look at another question that Zera Shimshon addresses. He says, and I have both verses now again side to side. I flipped them. This is the last verse of last week's Torah portion, followed by the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Take a look at your screen. Vishamarta in the Hebrew vernacular is in singular tense. Okay? So the verse reads in a singular tense that you shall therefore observe the commandments. Asher anochi mitzavecha, God says, as I command you today, singular. Move to the next verse. That's in the beginning of this week's Torah portion. The verse switches tenses and it switches to plural. We know we take every tense, every word, every letter in our Torah very, very seriously, that there must be a reason for it. Why is it that this week it's speaking in the plural tense? Ve'aya Eikev tishme'un. Not tishma. Tishme'un means to listen, to heed to the ordinances, but it's in a plural tense. Ushmartem, again, not vishamarta, ushmartem is in plural. Vasitem, and you shall perform, again in plural. So Zera Shimshon puts these two verses side to side, which they're really in the Torah side to side. One is the last verse of last week's Torah portion, and the second one is the verse in the first verse in this week's Torah portion. One is telling us, the first one's telling us in singular, The second's in plural. The first one's telling us there's no reward in this world. The second verse is telling us there is reward in this world. This is the gist of the comparison between these two verses that the Zera Shimshon is going to address in the very first piece we're going to learn now. Question clear? Give me thumbs up. Question clear? Good. Singular versus plural. No reward versus yes reward in this world. Okay? Listen to a beautiful interpretation the Zera Shimshon gives. I'll tell you the concept and then he expounds even more upon it. I think it's a beautiful concept. He says the basic rule is like we learned in the first verse. There's no merit or reward in this world. Real merit and reward for the deeds that we do is in the world to come. That's very hard, right? However, since the verse, listen to the way the Zera Shimshon explains it. Since the verse that we derive this concept that the reward is only in the world to come is written in the singular form, the Zera Shimshon says that that concept only refers to and is applied to an individual. That an individual, when an individual performs a good deed, even though it's an obligation from God, their reward is not in this world. Rather, their reward is in the world to come. However, explains the Zera Shimshon, when when a large amount of people together all perform a mitzvah, all do a good deed, they all are able to receive the merit in this world. Okay? And he proves this from the verse. Look at again your screen. Look at the verse 7:12. 7:12 is in plural. It says v'tishme'un. That v'aya Eikev tishme'un, when you collectively listen and collectively perform and fulfill the deeds, then God will give us the reward in this world. However, if you are only going to perform it as an individual, like in the end of last week's Torah portion, then it's hayom lasotam. Only today, the day that God commands you, are you able to fulfill it, but the reward is in the world to come. This is what the Zera Shimshon is giving us as an answer. It's a fascinating answer, and he continues to explain that since we're deriving it from this very verse, we have to be sure that it only applies to this verse. That means, again, singular form, individual mitzvah, rewards in the world to come. The reward of the masses, when the masses perform a mitzvah, whether it be prayer, whether it would be Torah study, like we're doing right now, whether it would be giving charity, doing a good deed, doing something great for others, doing something in the name of God, as a group, then the reward is in this world. God says, he guarantees that he will heed to the covenant he made with our forefathers. So why is it that the Torah switches the tenses? Fine, so singular versus plural, but is there more to it? So Zera Shimshon quotes a dispute in the Talmud, Masechet Sanhedrin, page 111a. And he quotes a dispute that the Talmud has between who's going to be redeemed at the end of times. It kind of feels like the end of times is approaching very quickly, right? Who is going to be redeemed at the end of times? The time of Mashiach. Who's going to be redeemed? So there is a dispute, a famous dispute between a very famous couple. I say couple, they weren't married obviously, but they were a learning couple. They were, as we say in Hebrew, a chavruta. They were close study partners. And this was Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe now's not the time for the story, but the short story is that Rabbi Yochanan brought Resh Lakish, who was the greatest bandit in the mafioner in the entire city back in the times, and he brought him closer to Judaism until he ordained him as a rabbi. He had his sister marry him, and they were study partners until the end of Resh Lakish's life. Rabbi Yochanan was so sad when Resh Lakish passed away. The Talmud says he was never consoled after the passing of his study partner. This was their dispute, and look how beautiful. Greatest friends, brother-in-laws, study partners, yet they were able to have an argument and a dispute and understanding what the true meaning of a verse is. Look at this verse in Yirmiyahu. It's in chapter 3. The verse is in Yirmiyahu chapter 3, verse 14. Famous verse, it says, Shuvu vanim shovavim neum Hashem. Return, backsliding children, says the Lord. Ki anochi ba'alti vachem, for I have possessed you. Now look, I put in bold the main part that the Talmud has this disagreement between Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. It says, God says, V'lakachti etchem echad me'ir u'shnayim mimishpacha. I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and bring you to Zion. Ve'eveti etchem Zion. Listen to the dispute between Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Resh Lakish says, based on this verse, only one person per city will be saved in the time of Mashiach, and up to two people per family. Very harsh. Rabbi Yochanan looks at Resh Lakish and he says, that's too harsh. God would not be proud of your interpretation of this verse. Rather, you're being too harsh on the Jewish people. I interpret the verse as follows. Look how beautiful this is. And remember this. He says that an entire family can be saved and redeemed in the time of Mashiach because of one family member. And an entire city can be saved because of one member of that city. Complete opposite. Rish Lakish is saying one per city or one per family is going to be saved. Rabbi Chaim says, no. One family member has the merit through their good deeds to save their entire family. And similarly, one city member, a person that lives in your city, one of your neighbors, has the merit to save, for the time of the redemption, the entire city. The Zera Shimshon reminds us that whenever there's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, which was his teacher, always comes on top. We always go with the halacha like Rabbi Yochanan. And so too here. So too Rabbi Yochanan had a much more beautiful interpretation, a much more loving and welcoming interpretation, that one family member, similarly one community member, city member, has the power through their good deeds to save the entire family or entire city. So now listen to the way the Zera Shimshon answers the change of tense, or the seemingly outlook of confusion that we may stumble upon when we see these two verses side to side. The last verse of last week's Torah portion and the first verse of this week's Torah portion, he says, the Torah begins in singular and then switches to plural to teach us exactly Rabbi Yochanan's lesson. He says that if one person keeps the mitzvot, his merit can protect the masses. But that's one person, that's the first verse, that has that power only when it's for the masses. But when the complete community does it, all together, they all receive the merit of their own deeds. So again, it starts off singular to say when the singular person does it, he can't get his own merit, but the merit can be put upon the whole city or the whole family. But when the entire nation or when a group of Jews fulfill a mitzvah, their merit is able to be reaped at that very, very moment in this world. So listen to the lesson that I want to share based on this portion of the Zera Shimshon, and that is that although an individual does not receive reward in this world for their mitzvot, the Jewish people as a whole do. The Jewish people do receive merit for this person's good deeds. And the merit of one person doing mitzvot is able to benefit so many other people. So even though sometimes we think that when you do something good, there's no outcome, there's no reward, even though in one way there isn't, but in other ways there are, we understand that the entire Jewish people, we are all connected as one soul, as one body. That when a Jew performs a good deed on this side of the globe, we don't understand the divine calculations, but somehow that protects and helps a Jew on the other side of the world, or maybe on the other side of your city, or maybe on the other side of your house. We don't know. All we know is that we have the option, we have the choice of making the right decisions based on what God wants us to do, or stumbling and giving into our temptation and not making the right decisions. What we have to understand is there is reward in this world, and there is reward to the masses. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. We went through the specifics. However, we are not to step upon, Eikev, we're not to step upon and dismiss any of the commandments in our Torah, because that is likened to a body, God forbid, that is missing a limb. It's likened to a painting which has a hole in it. We want to have our souls complete when we come to our Maker, to our Creator. And therefore, we're to put an amazing amount of effort into fulfilling all that God asks us to do, regardless of the reward. The reward is a fringe benefit. We spoke about this last week, for those of you who are with us. The reward is a fringe benefit. However, the main purpose is to connect to God, to get closer to God, and to understand that when we learn the Torah, when we fulfill the Torah, we are the ones who are gaining so very, very much. I want to move on to the next concept that the Zera Shimshon shares with us. This is based on a verse in chapter 8, verse 3. I'll share the verse. The verse is right over here. Chapter 8, verse 3. Vay'annecha vayre'ivecha vay'achilecha et haman. So listen to the following. God says that He has afflicted you, let you go hungry, and then fed you with manna. Asher lo yadata velo yadun avotecha. This manna, this wonder bread that came from heaven on a daily basis, you did not know, nor did your forefathers know. Leman hodiacha. You know why God has brought you this? He brought you this in order to let you know that man cannot just live on bread alone, but rather whatever comes forth from the mouth of the Lord does man live. And what the verse is telling us, in other words, is that the only reason why the Jewish people were able to survive on the bread that came in the desert, for 40 years they were sustained with this, was because it was a direct gift from God. It was because God said that they were going to survive on it. Under normal circumstances, a person cannot just survive on bread. They survive on anything and everything they see. Listen to a puzzling midrash. The midrash on this verse, in this week's Torah portion, says that our verse is a hint to the mitzvah, the commandment of lighting Shabbat candles. In our entire Torah, you know where the hint is to lighting the Shabbat candles? Well, the first one that we would all think of is the blessing of Sarah that Sarah had. She had the Shabbat candles lit, she had the challah baked, and she had the cloud for dignity and for privacy on top of her tent. The midrash here, it's another midrash, tells us that you know where the hint to lighting Shabbat candles is? This verse over here. So Zera Shimshon right away says, what's the connection? What's the connection between the fact that Hashem afflicted us, which we'll explain what that means, and made us go hungry by giving us the man to eat? What does that have to do with lighting Shabbat candles? Not tomorrow night, the following night, Friday night. All of our women, all of our wives are going to light Shabbat candles. It's their mitzvah. Don't take it away from them. They're going to light the Shabbat candles, and you know where the hint is to that? The fact that the Jewish people ate manna in the desert. What does one have to do with another? So listen to another midrash. This midrash is in Kohelet Rabbah that the Zera Shimshon quotes, and this will unlock this great mystery. Pay attention. Why was the man referred to as the food of starvation, the food of our hunger, asks the midrash. This was a question the sages asked one another, and one of the sages answered with a very, very clever answer. He brought 2 squashes, and he brings these 2 to the sages, and they were same size. However, one of them was whole, and the other was, pardon for the pun, squashed. He brought a squashed squash, okay? And He asks them. He put them even on a weight, and he weighed them and on a scale, and he saw that they both weighed the exact same. And he tells them, how much would be the comparison? How much would each one cost? And they said, well, if the wholesome one cost 2 coins, the squashed squash would only cost 1 coin. Even though they have the same weight, however, their value is drastically different. And why did he explain that? He explained, and this is an important concept. Get ready to listen to this. He said, because people enjoy the visual aspect of food just as much as the food's taste. We all understand the concept of culinary presentation. People go to school for years in order to not only cook, but to learn how to present, whether it be a starter, a salad, a soup, a main course, dessert, for crying out loud. The types of pictures we've seen, the things we've seen at weddings, the things we see in shops and in stores. It's to grab our attention, because what the Midrash is telling us is that a person eats with their eyes as much as they eat with their stomach. Explains the Zera Shimshon that the man was an amazing, amazing gift from God. Frankly, we've spoken about this. It could taste like anything you ever imagined it tasting like. However, there was one grand deficiency, explains the Zera Shimshon, and that was its lack of appearance. It was this light-colored, this white-colored wafer. Imagine you would be eating a hamburger, but you'd be crunchy like a wafer. It would be light like a wafer. That's not what you want. The experience you have when you want to eat a hamburger or a steak is a sizzling piece of meat that came off the barbecue. Juicy. Just like Ron makes it, right? That's what you want to eat. When you're eating ice cream or a sundae, you want it to be cold. You want it to be creamy. You want it to look like ice cream, not like a wafer. It's like those jelly bellies, Ron, that taste like these many flavors. Can you compare eating an orange jelly belly to eating real oranges? Of course not. And so on and so forth, and on and on and on with all the different types of food. This was a great, great deficiency that the man had. And this was, explains Zera Shimshon, the element of affliction that the man had, that the Jewish people had to endure while eating this man for 40 years. The Talmud says, this is Talmud Yoma, page 74b, that blind people, lo alenu v'lo alechem, are never satiated. A blind person just keeps on eating because it takes them almost double to eat what we eat in order to be satiated. We eat with our eyes and with our stomach. They only eat with their stomach. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are not able to see, they're blind, they're hard of sight, are overweight because they just keep on eating because they can't enjoy the culinary experience of seeing what they are eating. The Zera Shimshon says the Jewish people were the exact same way. They had this ongoing feeling of hunger for 40 years. Can you imagine of just never being satiated for 40 years? Many of us, over the 9 days, we weren't able to eat meat. And some of us had this feeling of just never being full, no matter what it is you eat. Can you imagine going 40 years of never being full and satiated and being content with your meal? That's what the Jewish people had. This was the hunger and the hardship the Jewish people experienced with the man. And this is what our verse is telling us. Okay, very nice. Thank you, Zera Shimshon. What does this have to do with the Shabbat candles. Listen to a fascinating concept, practical. You will have this in mind this Shabbat, guaranteed. Listen to this. The Zera Shimshon says, in order to fully enjoy your Shabbat meal, you know what you need? You need your Shabbat candles. You need light in the room to illuminate the room, to have the food, to have the meal visible. Eating in the dark is considered an affliction. It's considered a lack of oneg Shabbat, a lack of enjoyment of Shabbat. You know what the Shabbat candles come and do, explains Zera Shimshon? The Shabbat candles come light up the room and allow you to enjoy your Shabbat meal. Look at the source for the enjoyment that we have on Shabbat. This is in Yirmiyahu chapter 58, verse 13. Take a look at your screen. It says, and we say this Shabbat morning. Ironically, we say Shabbat morning right before we do the morning kiddush. If you restrain your foot because of the Shabbat from performing your affairs on my holy day, look what I have highlighted. V'karata la Shabbat oneg. And you call the Shabbat a delight. Likdosh Adonai mechubad v'chibato me'asot derachecha mimetzor chapatzecha v'daber davar. The holy of the Lord honored, and you honored it by not doing your wanted ways, by not pursuing your affairs and speaking words. Look at what I highlighted. Look what the Zera Shimshon pays attention to. V'karata la Shabbat oneg means you call the Shabbat a delight. That means the level of oneg, the level of delight we have on Shabbat is up to us. It's in our hands, explains Zera Shimshon. He says, you know how? By turning on the lights, by illuminating the Shabbat meal, by enjoying the meal, not only by eating the best food. Now, if I had to bet on the best food, Shabbat food, I would put in my wife, my mother, my grandmothers, my mother-in-law. Those of you who've eaten by us would cast in the same vote, okay? But each of us are to refer to our own wives and mothers and mother-in-laws, right, for all of us out there, that they make the best food. And it's true. We develop a certain taste of comfort of that type of food. But could you imagine eating it in the dark? What good does that do? How much does that help? What type of enjoyment and experience do you have? You know what the Navi is telling us? You know what the Zera Shimshon is telling us? You know what the Midrash is telling us? That in order to enjoy the Shabbat meal, you need to have the Shabbat candles there. You want to feel satiated? You want to feel the delight of Shabbat? Turn on the lights. Put the Shabbat candles on. That will be your ultimate culinary experience on Shabbat. Even after you invited the angels in Friday night. They're there. You should have the greatest oneg, the greatest pleasure and delight. No. It is still not present. You're still not able to enjoy your meal unless the Shabbat candles are lit, unless there's light in the room. So now we have to ask ourselves, why is it that God made the man with this deficiency? Why didn't God just give the man that you not only thought whatever you wanted it to taste like, but it just magically turned into it? I mean, God could obviously do that as well. Explains Zera Shimshon that the man was a spiritual food. Man was not physical. Of course, it had this physical ramification of it looked and felt like food, but sorry to mention it, but that the Jewish people did not have to use the restroom after eating the man. That means they didn't go to the restroom for 40 years. It was clearly a spiritual food. I mean, what type of food can you just imagine what it tastes like, and it tastes like that? Eating, however, is a completely physical experience. And in order for the man to preserve its spiritual nature, it had to be lacking in one way, and that was in the enjoyment that one was not able to see what they were really eating. It had to be still an absolute, complete spiritual experience, however, in this world. And that's why it was this white wafer that was able to be tasted like anything, but it wouldn't change its form. That is what the Zera Shimshon explains, is the reason why the Jewish people had this man with this deficiency. Listen to the lesson we learned, the lesson we're going to apply this Shabbat and hopefully for many, many more Shabbats. The importance of Shabbat candles, as the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat tells us, which not only is limited to those 2 candles that we light, or the multiple candles we light, but it extends to illuminating the house, the dining room, the kitchen, the hallways, the bathrooms. To illuminate the house, explains the Talmud, is to bring peace and harmony into the house. That a person's able to see where they're going, see where they're walking, not trip on things or other people. This great blessing that we have of lighting the Shabbat candles and illuminating the light is not only to enjoy the meal and to have that great family experience, but it's also to spend that great quality time with our loved ones. There's nothing like staying up Friday night after the meal if you haven't clunked out on the couch from that food and l'chaim and everything that came along. But to have the house illuminated, have a conversation, read a book, share some thoughts of Torah, all of this is derived from the Shabbat candles, which we understand gives the greatest eating experience. And that takes us back, says Zera Shimshon, to the Midrash. The Midrash says that our verse, that the man was an affliction of hunger for the Jewish people, is the hint to the obligation of lighting Shabbat candles. We understand now. Why? Because if you want to truly enjoy your food, it has to be presented properly. You have to see it. So to all those bakers and chefs and cooks who love cooking and baking for their family, which is a great mitzvah in and of itself, it's even a great mitzvah to spend time and effort into presenting it properly, not only all week long, but especially on Shabbat, to make the Shabbat food taste different, look different, and feel different. And may Hashem bless us that we will really, really enjoy the Shabbat food that our families make, along with our family and loved ones, many, many, many years to come. And please God that this pandemic will be over. God will spare us from this great, great tragedy so that we can share Shabbat meals again with our friends and family and loved ones. Maybe those that we're not, exposing ourselves to, so to say, in the meantime. But having those large meals, those meals where you're able to go and meet new people and enjoy new foods, may that time return in a very speedy manner. Amen ve'amen. Last but not least, the last portion of tonight's class, the Zera Shimshon is going to address, again, Moses rebuking the Jewish people. We said at the beginning of this book, the 5th book, the book of Deuteronomy, that the book of Deuteronomy spans over no more than 36 days, which is a tremendous amount shorter than any of the previous books. And in this 36-day period, as we explained, Moses was rebuking the Jewish people over all of the mistakes, deficiencies that they had over their time in the traveling and the wandering in the wilderness. Take a look at your screen at the following rebuke the Zera Shimshon makes to the Jewish people. It's these 2 verses. It's chapter 9, verses 7 and 8, and let's read them all together. Take a look at your screen. Zechor al tishkach, remember, do not forget, asher iktzafta et Adonai Elohecha bamidbar, how you angered the Lord your God in the desert. Lemin hayom asher yatzata me'eretz Mitzrayim ad boachem ad hayom hazeh, from that very day that you went out of the land of Egypt until you came to this place, mamrim heitem im Adonai, you have been rebelling against the Lord. So let's pause for a moment. Look at what this first verse is telling us. This first verse is telling us that from the very day that God took the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt, they already were angering him and they were rebelling. Now look at the next verse. Uvchorev hiktzavtem et Adonai. At Chorev, which is referred to as Mount Sinai, you angered the Lord. Vait anaf Adonai bachem lashmid etchem, and the Lord was incensed with you to destroy you. The Zera Shimshon says there's an obvious issue over here. In the beginning, the first verse, it says that from the first day they angered God. And then it comes to detail another time they angered God. The Zera Shimshon is asking, why did the Torah single out, why did Moses single out how they angered God at Mount Sinai, which we all understand was the sin of the golden calf, out of the many, many other times that they rebelled and angered God? Again, if he's rebuking them for angering God the entire time that they left Egypt from day one for the past 40 years, why does he stick in, oh yeah, you also angered God at Mount Sinai? It's a valid question. It's a powerful question. And bear with me with this beautiful, beautiful answer. The Zera Shimshon says at first Moses was speaking in general terms. Now he explains that in general terms means that we were referring to the way God knows every thought of every Jew at all times. That God knew that from the very beginning. Want to say hi? Okay, go. Close the door. That God knew from the very first moment that the Jewish people left Egypt, they were already rebellious. That was the first verse. The first verse was in general. The second verse is the way everyone else was able to see it, and it was portrayed to everyone else. You see, externally, the Jewish people looked like they were on the bandwagon from the moment they left Egypt. However, it became very clear what their intentions were all along when they sinned with the golden calf. So let me reiterate that, and then I will explain and expound upon it the way the Zera Shimshon does. Again, the first verse was in general terms. That was in the way that God understands us and understands the Jewish people that left Egypt. The second verse is on an external way, the way that any onlooker would look at the Jewish people. They'd say, well, only from the time of the golden calf did the Jewish people look like they were rebellious. Now, let's elaborate so we understand it. The Midrash, Zera Shimshon quotes a Midrash that says the following, that it was very impressive when the Jewish people said the famous words, Naaseh v'nishma. Take a look at your screen. This is in Exodus chapter 24, verse 7. It says, Vayikach sefer haberit vayikra beoznei ha'am, vayomeru kol asher diber Hashem naaseh v'nishma. And they said, all that the Lord spoke, we will do, and we will hear. And they obviously said that they will do before they hear. They will do before they even know what to do. So fascinating. The Midrash says how impressive it is for the Jewish people to be so committed to God and say they will do before they even know what to do. But then the Midrash continues and says, really? How impressive they are, the Jewish people? Look at this verse in chapter 32, verse 4. Where it says, Vayikach mi'adam vayatzer oto b'charet vayaseu egel masecha. This is speaking about the unfortunate event of Aaron casting the golden calf for the Jewish people. Vayomeru, you know what the Jewish people said? As soon as the golden calf came out of the fire, you know what the Jewish people said? Ele Elohecha Israel asher he'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. They all cried out and said, these are your gods, O Israel, who have brought you up from the land of Egypt. So the Midrash in one breath says, so impressive the Jewish people said Naaseh v'nishma before they even received the Torah. But yeah, really, how impressive are the Jewish people? They claimed the golden calf to be the God that redeemed them and brought them out of the land of Egypt. Really? Are the Jewish people that impressive? And the Zera Shimshon asks on this Midrash, why is the Midrash dismissing the great proclamation of the Jews of Naaseh v'nishma, that they will do, and then they will listen. Furthermore, the Talmud says that by them proclaiming Naaseh v'nishma, that they will do and then they will listen, they did so out of trust in God. The tremendous level of trust and belief in God. So why is the Midrash just dismissing this whole proclamation of Naaseh v'nishma as it just did by berating it and making a mockery out of it, like, the same people that said Naaseh v'nishma said that this is your God that removed you, that saved you from Egypt, referring to the golden calf. So Zera Shimshon explains that there are different commentaries to what the true meaning of the Jewish people's proclamation of Naaseh v'nishma really was. One was, as we just explained, that it was a good intention, it was a good proclamation. There are other commentaries who beckon to differ, and they say as follows. They say it was not with a good intention that they said Naaseh v'nishma. You know what their intention was? Their intention was rather to accept only the written Torah. Naaseh, the written Torah. And then God said, I have to force upon you to receive the oral Torah. What did he do? He lifted the Mount Sinai on top of the Jewish people and said, take and accept this, or Sham tieh kvuratchem, I will release this mountain and you will be buried over here. He lifted the mountain upon the Jewish people in order to force them to make sure that they accept the Torah. According to this interpretation, Naaseh v'nishma means as follows. Naaseh, we will do and fulfill the written Torah blindly. V'nishma, we'll listen to the oral Torah and we'll decide if we want to accept it or not. And now this interpretation only became very apparent later on by the sin of the golden calf. You see, when the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf, what they did was they proved that they did not have complete trust in God. What they did was they took this golden calf and they said, this is our God. They had no more trust in Hashem. And this is what Moses was saying at first. At first, Moses was saying, as we have in verse, take a look, as we have in verse 7, that from the beginning of when you left Egypt, you already angered God. God knew your intentions. But no one else knew that. No one else knew that your Naaseh v'nishma was also warped. You know when they knew? You know when everyone was able to understand? Ubechorev iktzavtem, at Mount Sinai. That's when it became apparent that from the beginning you were rotten. From the beginning you were rebellious, explains the Zera Shimshon. This is what Moses was saying when he was rebuking the Jewish people before his passing. How horrible it was that they came out with bad intentions. Now I just want to take a pause before we continue the end of the Zera Shimshon. It feels like I'm throwing the Jewish people under the bus. And in one way I am, but in another way I have to clarify that there are multiple sources in our rabbinic writings, in our sages, that the main issues stemmed from a negative influence of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. The Egyptians who came along for the ride, for the ooh-ha-ha moments, just to see all of this greatness. But in truth, the Jewish people were not that bad. You know what happened? They had bad influence. These Egyptians that came along and tagged along were nothing but stirring up garbage and problems nonstop for the Jewish people. And yet, since they eventually failed and they accepted these mixed multitude as part of them, they're blamed on their behalf as well. However, I just want to have as a disclaimer that they were a very, very high level of a nation. They were judged very, very high level and harsh because of their high level. And whenever we learn these concepts, it's only to understand the situation better, not to judge them, but to learn something practical for ourselves. So now let's just continue what the Zera Shimshon says before that we make it practical. The Zera Shimshon says that when Moses was originally told, go back to the beginning of Exodus, when Moses was told by God to go and be the messenger, you know Moses answers? Look at chapter 4 in Exodus, verse 1. Vayan Moshe vayomer, and Moses answers and he said, V'hen lo ya'aminu li. Behold, they will not believe me. They're not going to believe me when I come and tell them that God came to me and I'm going to come and redeem you now. V'lo yishme'u b'koli. They're not going to heed to my voice. Ki yomeru. You know what they're going to say? Lo nira elecha Adonai. That the Lord has not appeared to you. This is what Moses tells God. The Midrash says, you know what? God answers Moses. God got very upset with Moshe Rabbeinu. And the truth is not only the Midrash explains this, it's clear in the following verses, the following psukim. God got upset at Moses and says, how is it that you're saying they're not going to believe you? Not going to believe that I revealed myself to you? They are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. They are believers, the sons of believers. Avraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov are believers. They are their descendants. God was upset with Moses for thinking they were not believers and they trust him. Zera Shimshon asks, why was God upset? We just learned that the truth is they were not believers. They didn't have trust from day one. They did not believe in Hashem and they rebelled. Yes, it wasn't apparent until they stood at Mount Sinai and they sinned at the golden calf. But why is it that God was angry at Moses? Listen to a strong, applicable lesson to us all. God is telling Moses, based on the Zera Shimshon, you should have judged the Jewish people favorably. You should have given them the benefit of the doubt. At that point, before you revealed yourself to them, before you performed the 10 Commandments, before the splitting of the sea, before receiving of the Torah, you should have given the Jewish people the benefit of the doubt. Because only God knows a person's true intentions. Only God is the one that is able to judge another. And God was disappointed in Moses at his high level that he said that they don't have any trust and belief. At that point, Moses had an obligation upon himself to judge the Jewish people favorably. With this, I want to give 2 lessons based on this piece. The first is reiterating that it is God and only God who knows the intentions and thoughts of any person. He is the only one who truly knows what a person's motives are when they do something good or even something wrong. We have no need, no right to judge another person. The only thing we can do is purify our own thoughts and intentions to perform and fulfill with the sake of God in mind, and only that. That's all we can do. And on the other hand, we have an obligation to give others the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of laws and lessons when it comes to giving the benefit of the doubt, but I can say one thing as we approach the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is that God looks down at us at the way we judge others, the way we pass judgment on others, and he judges us in a similar fashion. If we are loose and lax and forgiving on others by not judging others stringently, rather favorably, God will do the same to us, especially in the spirit of and in the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when we're judged for the upcoming year. But unfortunately, and God forbid, if we do the alternative, and we are very strict on others and we judge others stringently, unfortunately, that is the way we are going to be judged from above. As King David said, Hashem tzilecha, that God is your shadow. Rabbi Chaim Kanievski tells us in the Nefesh HaChaim that, what does it mean that God is your shadow? King David is saying that the way we act, God acts to us. The way we act to others, the way we're forgiving and loving and pleasant and tolerant with others, is the same way God will act towards us. And unfortunately, the opposite will be the same way reciprocated towards us. So please, God, let us all have a positive judgment the upcoming year. I know we still have 2 weeks till Elul, and then another month until Rosh Hashanah, and then another 10 days till Yom Kippur. But it's never too early to prepare for the high holidays. And being that today we are standing a month and a half before Rosh Hashanah, let this lesson be a reminder to us to judge others favorably, especially our children, our spouses, our parents, our siblings. Now, during this pandemic, when many of us are spending much more time at home than ever, I remember when I would be giving a class and my child would come and interrupt me, or I'd be teaching, I would, shush them, push them away, like they're interrupting. But when you bring the class, when you bring the Torah into your home, and you have to do it with your family there, it teaches us a lesson that maybe we shouldn't be shushing and pushing away. So what? It won't look exactly perfect. There'll be a little slight interruption. But what lesson am I giving to my child? What lesson am I giving to those that I'm teaching? Are we living the Torah that we learn? Or are we letting it come in one ear and out the other ear? By us bringing the Torah and bringing our lives into our houses, now more than ever, over the past 6 months, more than ever, we need to really refocus on the things that we do. And one of them is the way that we judge our wife or our husband, our kids, our siblings, or anyone else that lives in our homes. Maybe if we are able to give them greater benefit of the doubt and be more tolerant with them, Hashem will be more tolerant with us, give us the benefit of the doubt this holiday season, and Bezrat Hashem for many, many more years to come.